Have you ever discovered that your entire life was a lie? Because I did. At 35 years old, my parents revealed I wasn't their biological daughter. But that wasn't the real secret. The real secret was why I disappeared as a baby. And why powerful people spent decades making sure I never learned the truth. Welcome back to Inspired Real Events, where ordinary people meet impossible family and the quiet ones learn the loudest lessons. If betrayal, gratitude, and slow burn justice are your thing, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe. Rain hammered against the windows of my parents' house, the same house where I'd celebrated birthdays, Christmas mornings, family dinners, the same house where every childhood memory lived. I sat across from my parents at the kitchen table. Something felt strange. The atmosphere was heavy. My mother barely touched her food. My father looked exhausted. I kept glancing between them. "Okay," I finally said. "What's going on?" Neither answered. My stomach tightened. "Mom," she looked at my father. My father looked at her, and suddenly I knew, not what they were about to say, but that whatever it was, it would change everything. My mother slowly reached across the table. Her hand trembled. "Emily," she whispered. The sound of my name in her voice frightened me because it sounded like goodbye. "You're scaring me." Tears filled her eyes instantly. My father lowered his head. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then my mother said the words that would echo in my head for years. "Emily, you're not our biological daughter." The room became silent. The rain disappeared. The world disappeared. All I could hear was my heartbeat. Boom, boom, boom. I blinked, then laughed nervously. "What?" Nobody laughed with me. I stared at them, waiting, hopping, begging, but their faces never changed. "Stop," I said. My mother began crying harder. "Emily." "No." I stood so quickly my chair nearly tipped over. "No," my voice cracked. "This isn't funny. It isn't a joke." I looked at my father. Dad. He couldn't even meet my eyes, and somehow that hurt more than anything, because if he had looked at me, if he had told me they were lying, I would have believed him. Instead, he whispered, "We should have told you years ago." The floor felt unstable beneath me. "What are you talking about?" My mother wiped tears from her cheeks. "When you were a baby, we adopted you." The words punched the air from my lungs. Adopted. The word felt foreign, ugly, impossible. I shook my head. "No, it's true. No. We have documents." "No." The scream shocked even me. I stepped backward. My chest hurt. I couldn't breathe. 35 years of believing one thing. And now they expected me to replace it with another reality, just like that. My entire identity. Gone. My mother stood. I immediately moved away from her. The look on her face nearly broke my heart, because she looked terrified that she was losing me. And maybe she was. I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore. "Why?" I whispered. The question hung between us. "Why now? Why tell me today? Why wait 35 years? Why lie? Why?" My father inhaled shakily. "Because someone contacted us." Every muscle in my body froze. "What?" "Someone contacted us." The words repeated in my mind over and over. "What do you mean someone contacted you?" My parents exchanged another look. And suddenly I knew there was more, much more. My mother sat down again, her hands folded together tightly. "Your biological family found us." The kitchen seemed to spin. I grabbed the edge of the counter. "My biological family." The phrase sounded unnatural, like a language I didn't speak. My biological family. People somewhere in the world connected to me by blood. People I'd never met. People who apparently knew I existed. 1,000 questions exploded inside my head. Who were they? Why now? What happened 35 years ago? Why did they give me away? Did they want me? Did they love me? Did they regret it? My father opened a folder. The sight of it filled me with dread. Inside were photographs, letters, documents, evidence, proof that my life wasn't what I thought it was. My father slid a photograph across the table. I stared at it, a woman, maybe in her late 50s, dark hair, green eyes. My breath caught. Green eyes, my eyes, not my mother's blue eyes, not my father's brown eyes, mine, for the first time in my life. I saw someone who looked like me, and it terrified me. "Who is she?" My mother's voice cracked. "Her name is Victoria." I couldn't stop staring. It felt like looking into a mirror from another lifetime. "She's my biological mother," my father nodded. The answer landed heavily. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then I asked the question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. "Does she want to meet me?" Silence. My father's expression changed. My mother's tears intensified. A horrible feeling spread through my chest. Something was wrong, very wrong. "Why aren't you answering me?" My father swallowed hard. Then he spoke. And those next words would become the beginning of a mystery that would change my life forever. "Emily," his voice trembled. She says your adoption wasn't supposed to happen. Everything inside me stopped. The rain continued outside. Thunder rolled across the sky, and for the first time that night, I realized this wasn't simply a story about adoption. It was a story about secrets. And someone had been hiding them for 35 years. My father's words hung in the air. She says your adoption wasn't supposed to happen. I stared at him. The sentence didn't make sense. Not completely. Not yet, but somehow it frightened me more than learning I was adopted. What does that mean? Neither parent answered immediately. The silence felt unbearable. I looked from my mother to my father, then back again. Every second stretched longer. Finally, my mother pushed a letter toward me. I think you should read this. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was elegant but uneven, as if the writer's emotions had made it difficult to hold the pen steady. The first line made my stomach twist. Dear Emily, if you are reading this, then your parents finally told you the truth. I swallowed hard. My eyes continued moving across the page. For 35 years, I have searched for answers. For 35 years, I have lived with regret. But the greatest regret of my life is that I never got the chance to tell you what really happened. My chest tightened. Really happened, I kept reading. The story you know is incomplete. You were never abandoned. You were never unwanted. And if I could go back in time, I would spend every breath fighting to keep you. Tears blurred the words. My hands trembled. I didn't know this woman. I had never met her. Yet somehow her pain felt real, personal, as if I could feel it through the paper. I continued reading. There are people who don't want the truth revealed. There are people who benefited from the lies. Please be careful. The letter ended with a phone number. Nothing more. No explanation, no details, just mystery, just questions. Thousands of questions. I lowered the letter slowly. What is this? My father rubbed his face. We don't know. You don't know. We received the letter 2 weeks ago. My pulse quickened. 2 weeks, my mother nodded. We were scared. Scared of what? Of losing you. The honesty in her voice pierced my heart. For the first time that night, I looked at her not as a woman who had hidden the truth, but as a mother terrified her daughter would walk away, because despite everything, she had raised me. She had kissed scraped knees, stayed awake during fevers, cheered at graduations, cried at my wedding. Those memories didn't disappear because of a secret, yet I couldn't ignore the hurt, the betrayal, the confusion. 35 years, 35 years. I kept repeating the number in my mind. The front door opened. I hadn't even realized someone else had arrived. Then I heard the familiar voice. Emily, my husband. Luke. Relief hit me so suddenly that I almost collapsed. I turned. The moment our eyes met, he knew something was wrong. He crossed the room immediately. What's happening? My father looked away. My mother began crying again. Luke wrapped an arm around me. The simple gesture nearly broke me. For years I had joked that Luke could read my mind. Now I wished he could, because I didn't know how to explain any of this. I looked at him, then finally said it. I'm adopted. The words felt strange, foreign. Luke blinked. What? I'm adopted. His eyes widened. I laughed weakly, not because anything was funny, because if I didn't laugh, I might completely fall apart. The next second, tears flooded my eyes, and suddenly I couldn't stop them. Everything I had been holding in crashed over me. The confusion, the shock, the anger, the fear. The grief for a life I thought I understood. Luke pulled me into his arms. I buried my face against his chest. And for the first time all night, I allowed myself to cry, not quietly, not politely. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep inside. The kind that hurts. The kind that leaves scars. Luke held me through all of it, never letting go, never asking me to stop, never telling me everything would be okay. Because sometimes people don't need promises. Sometimes they just need someone to stay, and he stayed. Hours later, we drove home in silence. Rain still covered the roads, streetlights reflected across the windshield. Everything felt unreal. Luke finally spoke. Do you want to call her? I stared out the window. The question terrified me. Victoria, my biological mother, a stranger, and yet not a stranger. Someone whose eyes matched mine. Someone who had apparently spent decades looking for me. I don't know. Luke reached over and squeezed my hand. Then don't decide tonight. I nodded, but deep down I already knew I was going to call because once a door opens, you can't pretend it never existed. The next morning I stood in our kitchen holding my phone. The number stared back at me, my heart pounded. Luke sat nearby, supporting me without pressure, without judgment, without expectations. I took a breath, then pressed call. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Part of me hoped nobody would answer. Then a woman picked up. Hello! The voice froze me, soft, nervous, hopeful. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then she whispered something that shattered me. Emily, My knees nearly gave out because she recognized my voice. She recognized me after 35 years, and suddenly I understood. Whatever happened in the past, this woman had never forgotten me, not for a single day. I couldn't speak. Neither could she. Then I heard crying. Quiet at first, then uncontrollable. The sound traveled through the phone and straight into my heart, and for the first time in my life, I heard my biological mother cry because she had finally found me. But before she could explain the truth, she said something that made every hair on my body stand up. "Emily," her voice trembled. "You need to know something." I gripped the phone tighter. "What?" A long pause followed. Then she whispered, "The people who took you weren't supposed to have you." My blood turned cold, because suddenly this wasn't a story about adoption anymore. It was becoming something much darker, and somewhere in the shadows of my past, someone was still hiding the truth. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Victoria's voice. "The people who took you weren't supposed to have you." The sentence echoed through my mind like a warning. Luke slept beside me, one arm draped across my waist, as if even in his dreams he knew I needed something solid to hold on to. I stared at the ceiling until sunrise. By morning, my nerves felt stretched thin. I was exhausted, terrified, and desperate for answers. Victoria had called again just after midnight. Not because she wanted to pressure me, not because she wanted anything from me. She simply wanted to know if I was okay. The concern in her voice felt strangely familiar. Like hearing a song I'd somehow known my entire life. By noon, we'd agreed to meet. A small cafe about 40 minutes away. Neutral ground, public, safe. Luke insisted on coming, not because he didn't trust Victoria, because he didn't trust the situation. And honestly, neither did I. The drive felt endless. My stomach churned the entire way. I kept imagining what she would look like in person. Would she resemble the photograph? Would she smile like me? Laugh like me? Would I recognize parts of myself in her, or would she simply feel like a stranger? The cafe appeared around a bend in the road, a charming little place with brick walls and flower boxes beneath the windows. Normally, I would have thought it was beautiful. Today, I barely noticed. Luke parked. My hands immediately began shaking. He looked over. "Want to leave?" The question surprised me. "You'd be okay with that," he nodded. "Emily, this isn't a test. Nobody gets to tell you what you're ready for." My eyes stung. God, I loved this man, not because he always had answers, because he never made me feel guilty for not having them. I took a deep breath. "No." "You sure?" I nodded. "I'm sure." We walked inside. The scent of coffee and cinnamon filled the air. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I scanned the room, then froze. A woman stood near the back corner. She looked exactly like the photograph. Dark hair, green eyes, my eyes. The moment she saw me, her hand flew to her mouth. Tears instantly filled her eyes, and suddenly neither of us could move. The entire cafe disappeared. The people, the music, the conversations, everything faded. There was only her and me. 35 years of separation standing face to face. I saw disbelief, hope, fear, love all at once, the same emotions crashing through me. Victoria took one hesitant step forward, then another. Her voice broke. She tried again. "Emily." The way she said my name nearly shattered me. Not because it sounded dramatic, because it sounded cherished. Like she'd spoken it a million times before, even when I wasn't there to hear it. Tears filled my eyes. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled through tears, and I felt something strange, not certainty, not trust, recognition, a tiny piece of it. Something buried deep inside me whispered that this moment mattered. Victoria looked at Luke. "You must be Luke." He nodded politely. "Nice to meet you." Victoria's smile widened. "Thank you," Luke blinked. "For what?" "For staying beside her." The sincerity in her voice caught us both off guard. Victoria looked back at me. "I prayed she'd find someone kind." My throat tightened. I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't prepared for any of this. We sat. An awkward silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just enormous. Because where do you begin after 35 years? "Hello. How have you been? Sorry I missed your entire life." Nothing seemed big enough. Finally, Victoria reached into her purse. She removed a small photograph. The edges were worn, as if it had been carried everywhere. She slid it across the table. My breath caught. It was a baby, me, a newborn wrapped in a pink blanket. I stared at the image, then at her. "You kept this." Victoria laughed softly through tears. "Emily," her voice cracked. "I carried that picture every single day." Every single day. The words hit me harder than I expected. Because they answered a question I hadn't known how to ask. Had she forgotten me? No, not even close. Victoria carefully wiped her eyes. I never stopped looking. My chest tightened. "What happened?" The question lingered between us. Victoria looked down. For a moment she seemed decades older, not physically, emotionally, like she was carrying years of pain. Then she slowly began. I was 20 years old. I listened, every nerve alert. I wasn't rich, I wasn't powerful, I wasn't connected. Her gaze drifted toward the window. But I loved you. A tear rolled down her cheek. More than anything, I swallowed hard. Victoria continued. Your biological father came from a very wealthy family. A knot formed in my stomach. They hated me. I had a feeling I already knew where this story was heading, but I wasn't prepared for the details. When I became pregnant, they offered money. My pulse quickened. What kind of money? Enough to disappear. Luke exchanged a glance with me. Victoria laughed bitterly. They thought I was after their fortune. The sadness in her smile broke my heart. I wasn't. What happened? Victoria hesitated, then answered. I refused. The cafe seemed quieter, as if the world itself was listening. They became angry. My heartbeat accelerated. They threatened me. The air left my lungs. What? Victoria nodded. They said I'd never be good enough. She paused. They said if I didn't walk away, they'd make sure I lost everything. I stared at her. Unable to speak, she took a shaky breath. I thought they were bluffing. The pain in her eyes told me they weren't. When you were born, everything seemed fine. She smiled faintly. You were beautiful. Fresh tears filled her eyes, the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I felt my own eyes burning. Victoria looked down at her hands, then her expression changed, darkened. 3 days later, you disappeared. The words slammed into me. What? You vanished. My heart stopped. You mean, they told me you died. Every sound in the cafe disappeared. Every single sound. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. They what? Victoria nodded slowly. Tears streamed down her face. They told me you died in the hospital. My body went numb. No, that wasn't possible. Victoria continued speaking through tears. They wouldn't let me see your body. I couldn't breathe. They wouldn't let me hold you. My hands shook. They wouldn't let me say goodbye. Luke looked horrified. I felt sick, completely sick. Victoria's voice cracked. They handed me paperwork. A sob escaped her. And I believed them. I sat frozen, unable to process what I was hearing, because if this was true, then someone had lied. Not a small lie, not a misunderstanding. A monstrous lie. A life-altering lie. Victoria wiped tears from her face. For years I mourned you. The grief in her voice was unbearable. I visited your grave. My stomach dropped. What grave? Victoria looked directly into my eyes. There wasn't one. The words sent chills through my entire body. No grave, no funeral, no proof. Nothing, just a story she had believed, until recently I leaned forward. What changed? Victoria's expression hardened. For the first time, anger replaced grief. 6 months ago, a retired nurse contacted me. Luke immediately straightened. My pulse exploded. A nurse, Victoria nodded. She worked at the hospital. Every instinct inside me screamed that this was important, very important. Victoria reached into her purse again. This time she removed a yellow envelope. Old, worn, protected for years. Inside were copies of hospital records, birth records, transfer records, documents, evidence, truth, or at least part of it. Victoria carefully placed one document before me. My eyes immediately landed on a name I had never seen before, a name written beside mine, a name connected to the day I was born. I looked up. What is this? Victoria's face had gone pale. The answer came in a whisper. The name of the woman who signed the papers. A chill crawled up my spine. Who is she? Victoria stared at me, then slowly answered. The woman who took you. The room tilted. My heart pounded, because for the first time, mystery had a face, a name, a real person. And somehow deep down I knew this was only the beginning, because whoever she was, she had spent 35 years hiding in the shadows of my life. And now, those shadows were starting to disappear. I stared at the document. The letters seemed to blur together. My pulse pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. The woman who took you. Victoria's words echoed through my head. I looked back down at the paper. The signature sat there quietly. Ordinary. Simple. Yet somehow terrifying, because one signature had changed the course of my entire life. Who is she? I asked again. Victoria swallowed. I don't know. My eyes widened. What do you mean you don't know? The nurse only gave me copies. She slid another document across the table. The hospital records were incomplete. Luke leaned closer. His expression grew darker. Someone had clearly removed pages. Entire sections were missing. Names blacked out. Dates altered. Information erased. It looked less like paperwork and more like evidence from a crime scene. I felt sick. Why would anyone do this? Victoria slowly shook her head. I don't know. But the truth was obvious. Someone wanted certain details hidden. Someone had gone to great lengths to make sure nobody learned what really happened. For 35 years. 35 years. The number kept haunting me. I studied the signature again. The nurse had highlighted it. A single note appeared beneath it. Find her. That was all. No explanation. No address. No phone number. Nothing, just 2 words, find her. The drive home felt different. Not because I had answers, because I had more questions than ever. Luke kept glancing toward me. I could tell he was worried. Honestly, so was I. By the time we pulled into our driveway, exhaustion hit me like a wave. I wanted everything to stop. The lies, the secrets, the confusion. I wanted my old life back. The version where my biggest concern was choosing what to make for dinner. Not wondering whether my entire existence had been built on a lie. Inside the house, I collapsed onto the couch. Luke sat beside me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he finally broke the silence. I don't think this was a normal adoption. I laughed weakly. That's becoming pretty obvious. No. His voice was serious, very serious. I turned toward him. Luke rarely jumped to conclusions. That was one of the things I loved about him. When he spoke carefully, it mattered. What are you thinking? He rubbed his jaw. I'm thinking someone had power. My stomach tightened. What kind of power? The kind that makes records disappear. The answer sent chills through me, because he was right. Hospital documents don't simply vanish. Names aren't removed for no reason. Entire files don't become incomplete by accident. Someone had protected this secret, someone important, someone influential, someone who had something to lose. I looked toward the envelope. The documents seemed to stare back, waiting, daring me to keep digging. Part of me wanted to burn them, to walk away, to forget everything. But another part of me couldn't, because once you've seen a crack in the wall, you can't stop wondering what's behind it. 3 days later, another surprise arrived. A package, no return address, no sender, nothing, just my name written across the front. My heart immediately started racing. Luke noticed. Don't open it. I looked at him. You think it's dangerous. I think we're dealing with people we don't understand. Fair point. Still, curiosity won. Carefully, I opened the package. Inside was an old photograph, nothing else, no letter, no explanation, just a photograph. I picked it up. The moment I saw it, my blood ran cold. It showed a hospital room, a woman holding a newborn baby, Victoria. There was no doubt. Even younger, I recognized her face instantly. And the baby in her arms was me. I stared. Unable to move, unable to breathe. Then something else caught my eye, someone standing in the background, partially hidden. A woman watching. My pulse accelerated. I stepped closer to the window, studied the image, then froze. The woman's face looked familiar, very familiar, too familiar. I grabbed another photograph from the envelope, the one Victoria had shown me. I placed them side by side, and suddenly everything inside me stopped, because the woman standing in the hospital room looked exactly like my adoptive mother. My hands began shaking. No, Luke looked over. What? No, I pushed the photograph toward him. His face immediately lost color. The room became silent, terrifyingly silent. Because we were both seeing the same thing, the same face, the same woman, my adoptive mother, standing inside the hospital room where I had been born. 3 days before I supposedly disappeared, I sank into a chair, my mind racing. Impossible. It had to be impossible. My mother had always told me she adopted me through an agency, that she and Dad waited years, completed paperwork, followed legal procedures. That's what I had always believed. But this photograph suggested something else, something much darker. Luke stared at the image. When was this taken? The day I was born. His jaw tightened. Then why was your mother there? I couldn't answer because I didn't know. And suddenly I wasn't sure I wanted to know. That evening I drove to my parents' house, alone. Luke offered to come. I refused. I needed answers directly. The moment my mother opened the door, she knew something was wrong. Her smile disappeared. Emily. I walked inside, without speaking, without sitting, without pretending. I placed the photograph on the kitchen table. Her eyes landed on it, and instantly she went pale, paler than I had ever seen her. The reaction lasted less than a second, but it was enough. She recognized it. My heart shattered, because innocent people don't react that way. They don't look terrified. They don't look guilty. They don't look like someone just uncovered a secret. My voice barely worked. Why were you there? My mother stared at the photograph, then at me, then back again. Tears immediately formed in her eyes. I felt anger rising, real anger, the kind that scares you, because beneath it was pain, years and years of pain. Tell me the truth. Silence. Mom. More silence. Finally, she sat down, slowly, as though her legs could no longer support her. My father entered the kitchen. The moment he saw the photograph, he stopped walking. His expression told me everything. He knew too. My heart sank. They both knew. The realization hurt worse than anything so far. Because until now I had convinced myself they were victims too, that they had simply adopted me, that they hadn't known, but now I wasn't sure anymore. My mother finally spoke, and the sound of her voice terrified me because she sounded broken. "Emily." Tears rolled down her face. "I'm so sorry." My pulse exploded. Sorry, not confused, not surprised. Sorry, I took a step backward. The room suddenly felt smaller, harder to breathe in. "What are you apologizing for?" My father closed his eyes. My mother looked directly at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes, not fear of losing me, fear of the truth. The answer came quietly, almost too quietly to hear. "We weren't supposed to be there." Everything inside me froze. The clock on the wall ticked. Thunder rumbled outside, and I realized that my parents had been hiding something far bigger than adoption. Something connected to the day I was born, something connected to that hospital room, something they had buried for 35 years, and now it was finally coming back. "We weren't supposed to be there." My mother's words echoed through the kitchen. The silence that followed felt unbearable. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, my entire world threatened to collapse again. I stared at her, waiting, hoping she would say something that made sense, something that explained the photograph. Something that proved she wasn't part of whatever nightmare I was uncovering. But the expression on her face told me the truth wouldn't be simple. Nothing about this story was simple anymore. My father slowly lowered himself into a chair. He suddenly looked older, much older, as if 35 years of secrets had finally become too heavy to carry. I folded my arms tightly, not because I was angry, because I was afraid of what I was about to hear. Afraid that every answer would destroy another piece of my life. "Start talking." My voice came out colder than I intended. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but this time I didn't rush to comfort her. I couldn't, not yet. She took a shaky breath, then began. "Your father and I tried to have children for almost 10 years. I remained silent. I knew part of this story already, at least I thought I did. "We went through treatments." Her voice trembled. "Doctors. Procedures. Heartbreak." Each word seemed pulled from a painful memory. There were times I thought I would never recover. For a moment, I saw not my mother, but a younger woman desperate to become one. A woman who had spent years watching other families grow while hers remained empty. A woman carrying invisible wounds. My father reached for her hand. She squeezed it, then continued. "Eventually, we gave up." A sad smile crossed her face. "I told myself maybe motherhood wasn't meant for me." The pain in her eyes felt genuine, real, and somehow that made everything harder because I wanted someone to blame. I wanted a villain. Instead, I kept finding people who looked broken, people who looked haunted, people carrying regrets. My mother swallowed hard. "Then one day someone contacted us." The knot in my stomach tightened. "Who?" My parents exchanged a glance. Neither seemed eager to answer. That frightened me, because by now I had learned something important. Every hesitation hid another secret. Finally, my father spoke. "A lawyer." "A lawyer," he nodded. "He represented a wealthy family." Immediately, my thoughts jumped to Victoria's story, my biological father's family, the wealthy family that had wanted her gone, the wealthy family that had threatened her, the wealthy family connected to my birth. My pulse accelerated. What did he want? My mother's hands shook. "He told us there was a baby." The room felt colder. "He said the baby needed a home." I stared, unable to look away. "He said the situation was complicated." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Complicated. That seemed like the understatement of the century. My father continued. "He said the mother couldn't care for the child." Victoria's face flashed through my mind. The woman who had spent 35 years grieving a daughter she thought had died. The woman who had never stopped searching. The woman who clearly wanted me. The anger rising inside me became harder to control. "Did you verify any of this?" My father looked ashamed. "No." I closed my eyes. Pain stabbed through my chest. "No. We trusted him." The answer sounded weak, fragile, maybe because even he no longer believed it. I stood and walked toward the window. I needed distance. Space, air, anything. The rain outside had become heavier. Dark clouds covered the sky. It matched exactly how I felt. Luke's voice echoed in my mind. Someone had power. Someone had influence. Someone made records disappear. I turned back around. Who was the lawyer? The question landed heavily. My mother's face lost color, again. Every time I asked the right question, she reacted the same way. Fear, guilt, regret. My father rubbed his forehead, then answered. His name was Charles Whitmore. The name meant nothing to me, yet something about it felt important, dangerous. I pulled out my phone, immediately searching. Within seconds, dozens of articles appeared. Business articles, corporate profiles, news reports. My heartbeat accelerated because Charles Whitmore wasn't just any lawyer. He had been one of the most powerful attorneys in the state. He specialized in protecting wealthy families, wealthy corporations, wealthy people with expensive secrets. My mouth went dry. I looked up. Why would someone like him be involved in an adoption? Neither parent answered. Because they didn't know, or because they were afraid to say it. I wasn't sure which. Then my father surprised me. There was something else. Every nerve in my body went alert. What? His expression darkened. At the hospital. The room became silent. I slowly sat back down. What happened at the hospital? My mother immediately began crying, not softly, not quietly. The kind of crying that comes from deep wounds, the kind people carry for decades. My father squeezed her hand, then looked at me. The lawyer arranged everything. I frowned. What does that mean? It means we didn't go through an agency. My stomach dropped. The words felt like a punch. What? We never met social workers. The room tilted. We never met adoption counselors. My breathing quickened. We never appeared before a judge. No, 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 every sentence sounded worse than the one before it. My father closed his eyes. Charles told us everything would be handled privately. The horror on my face must have been obvious, because he immediately added, "We were desperate, Emily." I laughed bitterly. A painful laugh. The kind that comes when your heart doesn't know what else to do. Desperate enough to ignore every warning sign. The words hurt him. I could see it, but I couldn't stop. Not anymore, because every answer revealed another lie, another hidden truth, another crack in the story I'd believed my entire life. My father lowered his head. Yes. The honesty stunned me. No excuses, no denial, just truth. And somehow that hurt more. My mother wiped her tears. Then whispered something that made my blood run cold. When we arrived at the hospital, she paused, struggling to continue. My pulse hammered. What? There was an argument. The room became still. What kind of argument? My mother's hands trembled violently. A terrible one. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. Between who? She looked directly into my eyes, then answered. Between the lawyer and a man. A chill ran through my body. What man? My mother swallowed. The man was screaming. The image immediately formed in my mind. A hospital hallway, chaos, fear, someone fighting, someone desperate. What was he saying? My mother's tears returned, and when she answered, every hair on my body stood up. He kept shouting. Her voice broke. Then she forced the words out. "You can't take my daughter." Silence, absolute silence. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Because suddenly Victoria's story wasn't just a possibility. It was becoming real, terrifyingly real. Someone had tried to stop this. Someone had fought. Someone had begged. Someone had known exactly what was happening, and nobody listened. I stared at my parents. Neither could meet my eyes. The weight of 35 years pressed down on all of us. Then another realization hit me. A horrifying realization. A question I hadn't asked. A question I was suddenly terrified to hear answered. I looked at my mother, then my father. My voice barely worked. "Did you take me home that day?" My mother's face crumpled. My father closed his eyes, and neither of them answered immediately. That silence told me more than words ever could, because whatever happened after that argument was the secret they had been hiding for 35 years. And judging by the terror in their faces, the truth was even worse than I imagined. The silence felt endless. I sat across from my parents, staring at them, waiting, begging, dreading. The question still hung in the air. "Did you take me home that day?" Neither answered. My mother's shoulders shook as tears streamed down her face. My father looked like a man carrying a burden too heavy to bear. Finally, he spoke. "No." Answer surprised me. "What?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "We didn't take you home that day." My heart skipped. For a moment, confusion replaced fear. "If you didn't take me home..." I couldn't even finish the sentence, because suddenly the story I'd built in my head no longer fit. My father leaned forward. "There were 3 days between your birth and when we brought you home." 3 days. The same 3 days Victoria had mentioned. The same 3 days before she was told her baby had died. My pulse quickened. What happened during those 3 days? My parents exchanged a look. One of those looks people share when they're deciding whether to reveal something painful. Then my father stood. Without a word, he walked toward the hallway. A minute later, he returned carrying an old cardboard box. I had never seen it before. The edges were worn, dust clung to the corners. It looked forgotten. Hidden, protected. My stomach tightened. "What is that?" My father placed it carefully on the table. Then sat down. "We should have shown you years ago." The sentence made my chest ache, because it seemed every truth in my life came with those words attached. Years ago, years ago, years ago. Inside the box were photographs, documents, letters, hospital bracelets, old receipts. fragments of a story nobody had wanted to tell. My father slowly removed a folded newspaper clipping. The paper had yellowed with age. Carefully, he handed it to me. I unfolded it. The headline immediately caught my attention. Local business heir involved in public scandal. Below the headline was a photograph. The moment I saw it, my breath caught. A man, young, handsome, dark hair, green eyes. I froze, my pulse thundered. No, it couldn't be. I looked closer. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. My hands began shaking. Who is this? My mother's expression broke my heart because she already knew what I was realizing. My father answered. His name was Daniel Hawthorne. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. And my father's eyes filled with sadness. He was your biological father. Everything inside me stopped. I stared at the photograph, unable to look away. For 35 years, I'd never known his name, never known his face, never known anything. And now he was staring back at me from a newspaper clipping. I couldn't explain what I felt. Curiosity, anger, sadness, grief for someone I'd never met, questions, so many questions. I looked down at the article. The story described Daniel as the son of one of the wealthiest families in the region, the Hawthornes, a family known for power, money, influence. The article mentioned disputes within the family, business disagreements, public controversy, but one paragraph stood out. I read it twice, then a third time. Daniel Hawthorne has reportedly become estranged from his family following personal disagreements regarding a private family matter. Private family matter. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what that meant. Me, Victoria, the pregnancy, the child they didn't want. The article suddenly felt less like news and more like evidence. I looked up. Was he the man in the hallway? My mother's face turned pale. She nodded. The answer hit me like a wave. The screaming man, the desperate father. The man shouting that they couldn't take his daughter, my biological father. I stared at the photograph again, trying to imagine him, trying to imagine his fear. Trying to imagine the moment his child disappeared. A child he never stopped fighting for. Luke's words from days earlier echoed in my mind. Someone had power. Someone made records disappear. Someone controlled the story. The pieces were beginning to fit together, and I hated what they were revealing. What happened to him? The question escaped before I could stop it. My parents looked at each other. Then my father slowly exhaled. The hesitation terrified me. What happened? My mother wiped away tears. Daniel never stopped searching. A chill ran through me. He searched for me. My father nodded. For years. The image crushed me, a father searching, a mother grieving, a daughter growing up only a few miles away without knowing either of them existed. It felt cruel, unimaginably cruel. Did he ever find me? No. The answer hurt more than I expected. My father lowered his eyes. He died believing you were gone. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the table. What? My voice cracked. What do you mean he died? Nobody answered immediately. The silence itself felt like a wound. Then my father finally spoke. Car accident. My chest tightened. When? 23 years ago. 23 years, I did the math automatically. I had been 12 years old, living my normal life, going to school, playing with friends, complaining about homework while somewhere not far away. The man who had fought for me was dying. Never knowing I was alive, tears blurred my vision. I hated that. I hated grieving someone I'd never met, but I couldn't stop. Because suddenly he wasn't just a stranger. He was a father who had loved his daughter enough to fight an entire powerful family. A father who had never given up. A father who never got the chance to know the truth. My mother reached across the table. I instinctively pulled back. The hurt in her eyes was immediate, but I couldn't help it. Not yet. Not while my world was still collapsing. My father opened another envelope. Inside was a photograph. This one was different, much different. The moment I saw it, my heart nearly stopped. Daniel stood beside Victoria, both smiling, both young, both happy, and in Daniel's hands was a tiny pink blanket, the same blanket from my baby photograph. My throat tightened. Because for the first time, I wasn't looking at victims. I was looking at parents. Parents who had wanted their child. Parents who had loved their child. Parents who had lost their child, and somehow, that child was me. The room grew silent. Then my father said something unexpected, something that changed everything. There's one more thing. I looked up slowly, every nerve in my body on edge. What? My father reached into the box, then carefully removed a sealed envelope. Unlike everything else, this envelope looked newer, protected, preserved, important. Across the front, written in faded ink, were 4 words. For my daughter, Emily. My breath caught. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stared, unable to move, unable to think, because beneath those words was a signature. A signature that made tears instantly fill my eyes. Daniel Hawthorne, my biological father, the father who had died 23 years ago, the father who never knew I was alive, the father who had somehow left behind a letter addressed to me. My hands trembled as I reached for it. 1,000 emotions crashed through me. Fear, hope, grief, love, questions. The envelope felt heavier than paper should feel, as though it carried decades of secrets. Decades of pain, decades of truth. I looked at my father, then at my mother. Neither spoke, neither moved. The entire room seemed frozen, waiting, watching, holding its breath. Slowly, carefully, I broke the seal, and as I unfolded the letter inside, I had no idea that the words waiting for me would reveal a truth far bigger than adoption. A truth powerful people had spent 35 years trying to bury, and a truth that would place me directly in the path of the family that stole everything. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the letter. The paper was old, not as old as the newspaper clipping, not as old as some of the photographs, but old enough to have waited years. Decades, waiting for me, waiting for a daughter who was never supposed to read it. The room was completely silent. My mother stared at the table. My father looked exhausted. Neither spoke, neither interrupted, because they understood something I was only beginning to realize. This wasn't just a letter. It was a voice reaching across 23 years. A voice from a father who had died believing his daughter was gone forever. My eyes filled with tears before I even read the first word. Then I began. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then one of two things has happened. Either I found you, or someone finally told you the truth. I pray it's the first, but in my heart I fear it may be the second, because powerful people have spent years making sure the truth stays buried. I stopped. My pulse quickened. Even Daniel knew, even back then, he knew someone was hiding things. I continued reading. I don't know where you are, I don't know if you're safe. I don't know if you remember me, but I need you to know something. You were wanted. You were loved. From the moment I first held you, I loved you more than my own life. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. Never let anyone convince you that you were abandoned, because you weren't, not for a single second. A tear rolled down my cheek, then another. I wiped them away. But more followed. The words felt alive, as though he were speaking directly to me, as though every sentence had been written yesterday instead of more than 2 decades ago. Luke's arm wrapped around my shoulders. I hadn't even realized he had arrived. Somehow his presence made it easier to breathe. I leaned into him slightly, then continued. Victoria and I fought for you. We fought harder than anyone will ever know. The day you disappeared was the worst day of our lives. They told us you were gone. But I never believed them, not completely. Something felt wrong, something always felt wrong. My heartbeat accelerated. The next lines hit even harder. I hired investigators, private detectives, former police officers, anyone willing to help. Most found nothing. Some refused to continue. Others were pressured to stop asking questions. That was when I realized this wasn't an accident. Someone powerful was involved. Someone with money. Someone with influence. Someone willing to destroy lives to protect a secret. The room seemed colder. Every sentence confirmed my worst fears. This had never been a misunderstanding. This had never been a paperwork mistake. Someone had orchestrated everything. Someone had planned it. I continued reading. If I am right, then the people responsible belong to my own family. My breath caught. My eyes widened. No, no, no. I reread the sentence. Then read it again. The people responsible belong to my own family. The words felt impossible, yet somehow not surprising. Not anymore. Daniel's family, the Hawthorns, the wealthy family who had hated Victoria, the wealthy family who had wanted the baby gone. My stomach twisted. I kept reading. I wish I could prove it. I came close several times, too close. And every time I got near the truth, doors closed. Records disappeared. Witnesses changed their stories. People became afraid. A chill crawled up my spine because it matched everything we'd already discovered. Every missing document, every erased record, every unanswered question. Daniel had been chasing the same truth, and someone had stopped him. For years, I turned the page. My heart pounded harder. Then I saw the final section, the part written in darker ink, as though he'd added it later, perhaps after discovering something important, something dangerous. Emily, if you found this, then I was right. Someone inside my own family arranged Emily's disappearance. I couldn't breathe. The sentence felt impossible, and yet every discovery pointed toward the same conclusion. My eyes moved to the next paragraph. Then everything inside me froze, because Daniel had written a name, one specific name, the person he believed orchestrated everything, the person responsible, the person behind the lies, the person behind my disappearance. I stared at the page, unable to move, unable to think, because the name written there wasn't Charles Whitmore. It wasn't some unknown criminal. It wasn't even Alina Hawthorne. It was someone I already knew, someone I trusted, someone who had been part of my life for 35 years, and if Daniel was right, then the biggest betrayal wasn't waiting in my past. It had been sitting at my family dinner table all along. I couldn't take my eyes off the page. The name sat there, simple, ordinary, yet it felt like a bomb waiting to explode. My heart hammered against my ribs. Luke stood beside me, reading over my shoulder. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved, because if the name was true, everything would change. Slowly, carefully, I looked down again and read it a second time. Margaret Sanders, my adoptive mother. The woman who had kissed my forehead before school. The woman who taught me how to bake cookies. The woman who sat beside my hospital bed when I broke my arm at 14. The woman who cried at my wedding, my mother. Or at least the woman I had always called Mom. The room spun. I sank into a chair. No, my voice barely worked. No, Luke crouched beside me. Emily, no. Tears burned behind my eyes because I didn't want to believe it. I wanted Daniel to be wrong. I wanted this to be a misunderstanding, a mistake, anything except the truth, but the evidence kept piling up. The photograph, the hospital, the lawyer, the missing records, the lies, every road somehow led back to her. Luke gently took the note from my hands. He continued reading. Then his expression changed. What? I asked. He looked uneasy, very uneasy. There's more. My stomach dropped. Of course there was. There was always more. Luke handed me the page. My eyes immediately found the next paragraph. I don't believe Margaret acted alone. I believe she was manipulated, used, promised something she desperately wanted. But she knows more than she's admitted. Far more. I stared again and again. The words hit differently, not because they cleared my mother, because they complicated everything. Daniel didn't believe she was the mastermind. He believed she was involved, a participant, not necessarily the architect. I wasn't sure whether that made me feel better or worse. Luke opened another envelope. Inside was a cassette tape, old, dusty, forgotten. A small label had been attached to it. The handwriting matched Daniel's. Interview, January 2003. My pulse accelerated. Interview? Luke nodded. We searched the cabin until we found an old cassette player. To our amazement, it still worked. The tape clicked into place. Static filled the room. Then a voice emerged, Daniel's voice, for the first time in my life. I heard my biological father speak. My throat tightened instantly. He sounded calm, tired, determined, a man carrying too much weight. Then another voice appeared, a woman's voice. Older, nervous, familiar, very familiar. My stomach dropped because I recognized it immediately. Alina Hawthorne, my grandmother. The woman Daniel had told me to find. The recording crackled. Then Daniel spoke. Tell me what happened. Several seconds passed, then Alina answered. I tried to stop it. The room became silent. Luke and I exchanged a glance. I pressed closer to the speaker, every nerve alert. Daniel spoke again. Then tell me who planned it. A long pause followed. The kind of pause that contains years of regret, years of guilt, years of fear. Finally, Alina answered, and her words shattered everything. It started with your father. My pulse exploded. Daniel's father, my grandfather, the head of the Hawthorne family, the man nobody had mentioned, the man hiding in the shadows behind every story. The tape continued. He couldn't accept Victoria. Alina sounded exhausted, broken. He said she would ruin the family. I felt sick. Every sentence made the truth darker, more painful. He wanted the baby gone. The words landed like a punch. Gone, not adopted, not relocated. Gone. The coldness of it made me shiver. Daniel's voice became harder. Did he arrange it? Alina began crying. The sound filled the room, then she answered. Yes. My heart stopped. There it was, the truth, at least part of it. The patriarch of the Hawthorne family had orchestrated everything. Because his son loved the wrong woman, because a child threatened his reputation, because power mattered more than people. I clenched my fists. Anger surged through me. Not ordinary anger, the kind that grows from injustice. Kind that comes from stolen years. The tape continued. Then Daniel asked the question that changed everything. What about Margaret Sanders? Silence. My breathing stopped. I waited. Luke waited. The entire world seemed to wait. Then Alina answered, and tears instantly filled my eyes. She didn't know the truth. I froze. What? The words escaped my lips before I realized it. The tape played on. She believed the baby had been surrendered. Alina's voice shook. She believed the paperwork was legal. I felt dizzy, completely dizzy, because suddenly everything shifted. Everything. My mother wasn't innocent, but maybe she wasn't guilty in the way I'd imagined. The tape continued. Then why was she there? Daniel demanded. Another painful pause, then Alina answered. Because your father wanted a couple ready to take the child immediately. The room spun. I struggled to process it. Margaret had been involved, present, connected, but perhaps she hadn't known the full truth. Perhaps she had been manipulated too, just like Daniel suspected. The recording crackled. Then Alina whispered something that made my blood run cold. "There's one thing nobody knows." Daniel immediately responded. "What?" The next words changed everything, everything. The baby wasn't supposed to go to Margaret. My heart stopped. Luke stared at the speaker. The room felt frozen. What did that mean? The tape continued. "The plan changed at the last minute." My pulse hammered. "Why?" Daniel asked. Alina's answer came through tears. "Because someone else wanted her." Silence, terrifying silence. I stared at the tape player, unable to move. Unable to think. Someone else wanted her. Someone else wanted me. My mind raced. Who? Why? For what reason? The recording ended abruptly. Static filled the room, then silence. Absolute silence. Luke slowly switched off the player. Neither of us spoke, because neither of us understood. Not completely. Yet one thing was clear: the story wasn't finished. Not even close. My biological grandfather had arranged my disappearance. My mother may have been deceived. And somehow another person had entered the picture. An unknown person. A hidden player. Someone whose identity remained a mystery. I stared at Daniel's notes, then at the photographs, then at the lake outside. The sun had begun setting. Long shadows stretched across the water. Everything felt eerily still. Then Luke found something. A folded piece of paper tucked inside the bottom of the box. Almost hidden, almost missed. He unfolded it. Immediately his face changed. Fear, shock, disbelief. I stood. "What?" He looked at me, then slowly handed me the paper. My eyes landed on a single line. A line written in Daniel's handwriting. A line that made my entire body go cold. "If you're reading this, Emily, then the person who knows the final truth is already in your life." The air left my lungs. Already in my life. Not in the past. Not hidden somewhere. Not lost. Already in my life. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. The final piece of this mystery wasn't waiting to be found. It was waiting to reveal itself. I didn't sleep that night. Not at the lake house. Not on the drive home. Not even after Luke convinced me to lie down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same sentence. The person who knows the final truth is already in your life. Already in my life. The words haunted me. Who could it be? My mother, my father, Victoria, Alina. Someone I hadn't even considered. For 35 years, my life had been built on incomplete stories. And now, standing at the edge of the truth, I was terrified of what remained hidden. The next morning, my phone rang. The caller ID made my stomach tighten. "Victoria," I answered immediately. "Hello." Her voice sounded strange, shaken. "Emily, someone came to see me." I sat upright. "What?" There was an older woman. My pulse accelerated. "Who?" A pause followed. Then Victoria whispered the name. "Alina Hawthorne." I nearly dropped the phone. My grandmother, the woman from the recording. The woman my father had told me to find. The woman who apparently knew everything. "Where is she?" "She wants to meet you." My heart began pounding. "When?" "Today." Luke was already grabbing his keys before I even finished the call. 2 hours later, we arrived at a small church outside the city. The location surprised me. I expected a mansion, an office, some luxurious Hawthorne property. Instead, Alina had chosen a quiet church surrounded by oak trees. It felt peaceful, almost humble. Nothing like the powerful family she'd spent decades connected to. When we entered, I spotted her immediately. She sat alone in a pew near the front, older than the woman in the recording, smaller, frailer, yet somehow carrying the same sadness I'd heard in her voice. She looked up. The moment our eyes met, tears filled hers. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then she stood, slowly, carefully, as though carrying the weight of decades. "Emily!" Her voice cracked. I nodded. Neither of us knew how to begin. How do you greet the grandmother you've never known? How do you speak to someone connected to the greatest mystery of your life? Finally, Alina gestured toward the pew. "Please sit." Luke remained beside me, protective as always. Alina noticed. A faint smile appeared. "Your father would have liked him." The comment hit me unexpectedly hard, because for the first time, someone spoke about Daniel not as a mystery, but as a father, a real person. Someone who should have been part of my life. Alina folded her hands, then looked directly at me. "I don't have much time." The sentence frightened me. "What do you mean?" She smiled sadly. "I'm old, Emily." The honesty hurt, because I suddenly realized something. Every person connected to this story was aging. Every year increased the chance that answers would disappear forever. Alina took a deep breath, then finally began. "The recording you found was real." I nodded. "I know." But it wasn't complete. My pulse quickened. Of course it wasn't, nothing ever was. There was another conversation. I leaned forward. What conversation? Alina looked down. For a moment she seemed unable to continue. Then she whispered, the conversation where your father learned the truth. The church felt silent, sacred, every word mattered. What truth? Alina's eyes filled with tears. The truth about who saved you. I froze. Saved me? The word caught me completely off guard. Saved, not took. Not adopted. Saved. My heartbeat accelerated. Alina continued. When your grandfather arranged your disappearance, there were people helping him. I wasn't surprised. Powerful men rarely work alone. But one person changed her mind. The church seemed smaller, the air heavier. Who? Alina looked directly into my eyes, then answered. Margaret Sanders. Everything stopped. My mother, my adoptive mother. I stared, unable to speak, unable to process. Alina nodded slowly. As the truth became clearer, she realized something was wrong. Tears filled Alina's eyes. Very wrong. My throat tightened. She knew. Not everything. Alina shook her head. But enough. I struggled to breathe, because suddenly the woman I'd been questioning looked different, not innocent, not guilty, human, complicated, flawed, afraid. Alina continued. Your grandfather planned to move you overseas. The words slammed into me. What? Luke looked equally stunned. Alina nodded. Wanted every connection erased. The horror of it made me sick. No chance of discovery. No chance of reunion. No chance for Victoria or Daniel to ever find me. Gone forever. Alina's voice trembled. Margaret learned about the plan. A tear rolled down her cheek. And she refused. My chest tightened. Refused. She threatened to go to the police. The church became silent. I could barely think. My mother, the same woman who had spent years carrying guilt. The same woman who had hidden the truth. She threatened them. Alina nodded. Your grandfather panicked. For the first time in decades, I felt a tiny piece of the puzzle click into place. Not perfectly, but enough. He allowed the adoption. The words felt surreal. Alina closed her eyes briefly. Margaret believed she was saving you. I couldn't stop crying, not because the pain vanished, because life suddenly felt more complicated than villains and heroes. My mother had hidden the truth. That hurt, deeply. But she had also protected me. Saved me, loved me, raised me. The contradiction overwhelmed me. Alina reached into her purse, then handed me a small envelope. My pulse accelerated. What is this? A sad smile crossed her face. The final thing your father left behind. Tears instantly filled my eyes. Another letter, another piece of him. Another chance to know the man I never met. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single page. The handwriting was unmistakable. Daniel. I began reading. Emily, if you've reached this point, then you've uncovered more truth than I ever managed to find. And if Alina gave you this letter, then she finally found the courage to tell you everything. There is one thing I need you to understand. You can spend your life chasing the people who stole years from you. You can spend your life angry. You would have every right, but don't let bitterness become your home, because life is too short. Trust me. I know. What matters isn't who took you. What matters is who loved you. Victoria loved you. I loved you. And despite her mistakes, Margaret loved you too. Love is messy. People are flawed, family is complicated, but love is real. And if you are lucky enough to find someone who chooses you every day, hold on to them. Never let them go. My vision blurred. I couldn't continue. Not immediately. Because one sentence hit me harder than all the others. Someone who chooses you every day. Slowly, I looked toward Luke. My husband, the man who never left. The man who stood beside me through every revelation, every heartbreak, every tear, every secret. The man who spent months helping me search for answers that weren't even his. Luke smiled softly, and suddenly I understood. My husband hadn't changed everything with one dramatic gesture. He changed everything because he stayed. Again and again, every day. Choosing me, the same way family should. Weeks later, I sat at a long table surrounded by people I never imagined sharing a meal with. Victoria sat beside me, tears appearing every few minutes because she still couldn't believe I was real. Alina sat across from us, older, weaker, but finally at peace. My adoptive parents sat nearby. The conversation between us hadn't been easy. There had been tears, arguments, painful truths, but there had also been forgiveness. Not instant forgiveness, real forgiveness. The kind that takes work, the kind that takes honesty, the kind that grows slowly. My mother eventually told me everything she knew, every mistake, every fear, every regret. And for the first time in decades, she stopped carrying those secrets alone. The healing wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is, but it was real. As dinner ended, I stepped outside with Luke. The sunset painted the sky in gold and orange, beautiful, quiet, peaceful. I leaned against him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. So, I laughed softly. So, do you know who you are now? The question lingered between us. A year earlier, I wouldn't have known how to answer, maybe not even a month earlier. But now I did. I looked toward the house, toward Victoria, toward my parents, toward the complicated family that somehow belonged to me. Then I looked at Luke, the man who helped me find my way through the darkness. And finally, I smiled. Yes, he squeezed my hand. Who? Tears filled my eyes, not sad tears, the kind that come when your heart finally understands something important. I looked toward the sunset, then answered. I'm Emily Faith Sanders. For the first time in my life, the name felt complete, not because I had discovered where I came from, because I finally understood that family isn't built by blood alone. It's built by love, and love had been finding me all along. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. Tell me about the door that opened for you. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.